When his sister flatlines again and the machine starts beeping rapidly, like a heart about to explode, he holds his mother's hand, and as the doctors work on her, he repeats all the names he can remember. Florence, Louise, John, Vera, Abel, even Abel. If Chloe lives, he swears he'll go home and comb every inch of the apartment for that cardboard box or any remnants. If anything is left of the real Abel Paisley, even a thimbleful of ash, he'll wear him proudly around his neck as a poultice. He exalts him like the rest of his ancestors, even if he isn't worthy. So guys, These Ghosts Are Family by Maisy. Now this is a debut novel by a Jamaican author, and you guys know I'm Jamaican, so I was very excited, especially when a Jamaican author gets a lot of shine. But I wanted to make sure that it was going to be authentic, not washed down. Them should keep it real, should chat the patois, all of that in the book. Yes, that's what I was looking for, and she did. Now this story is about a man who faked his death and took the identity of a friend and lived quite a few years, I think about 30 years with that identity. And what ended up happening is now he's old and he wants to unleash all this guilt that he felt for taking someone's identity. In my culture, when you die, you get celebration, you get the 9-9, you get all of that. And he took away this man's basically proper burial, proper send-off. And that's that piece of guilt that he wanted to unleash. But he also left family, left his children, he left the woman he was with, and started a new life with this name. And he seeked out a family member, which happens to be his daughter, to unleash all of this information on. But as the story continues on through that part, you realize it's more than that. There's this biblical term where the sins of your father. So he's traveling through this in the story of these ancestors, and you are seeing the parts of his children and the children's children, and also going way back to a plantation in Jamaica, and what is perceived to be a family member, but not 100% sure in the story, but tracking that and how that family member is connected to someone else. There's so many things in this story because it is the kind of the sins of your father seems to gravitate more to the women in this story. The women carry the burden, the what you call the generation of burden of not being able to grieve, not being able to live a certain life. You especially the women that he's encountered who has dealt with different things of mental health, of not being able to grieve, and what will be conceived as bad in terms of a religious stand. And you do see the religious terms in this. The part I read is called worship, and there's so many things in the story that is a reflection of deeper things, of deeper things that we don't think about, deeper things that it seems magical in the story because there's this magical realism, but it also is so true to a lot of cultural thought process in Jamaica, of what we think our ancestors are, and this idea of ghosts and how it follows us, good or bad. And really love that. I do like the creativity. There are moments where the transition from the now to back into the 1800s where you kind of have to really soak it in to understand what the purpose of that in the story. I did find that I did read a few chapters. Once I was done, I went back to reading a few of the chapters, a few sections to really soak it in and to get the more to why that part was so important in the story. There are some folk tales in here. It is very interested. I do have this nostalgic moments where I remember just pulling up and listening to my uncle telling me these stories that didn't make any sense. There are more of a metaphor, but if you're young, you don't understand what that means. And she did that in this, especially how she ends the story. with those three children. I thought it was interesting, but I got it. There's like bits and pieces of a lot that she packed in, because this is not a big book, but it does have a lot of different snippets of characters of that you learn a little of, but she doesn't dig in deep, because Abel is the center of the story. But I find that Abel, you didn't get to really know a lot about him, except for the before he took the identity of someone, because I felt like he became a shell, this empty shell, as once he took the identity of someone else. Because even his reaction to certain things that were said and done, you can see that he wasn't, his emotion was just so like a rock, a stone. And there's just a part where the comment was made like, yeah, typical Jamaican man, and I wanted to laugh so bad, but I'm like, damn it. A lot of that is true. It's a stereotype that I've experienced to be true in terms of the Jamaican men in my life, family, and others. So I laughed at that, but then you kind of see where a bit of where that comes from. But I wanted a little bit more of that in the story. I wanted to know him more, and I felt I didn't get to really know a lot of him, why he chose certain things. But I get the whole idea of, again, the sins of your father idea in this book. But I enjoy this. I enjoyed this. It did give me a lot of laughter. It did feel sad at points. But it also, I like that she did do a little bit of research. I mean, it is fiction, but there are some plantation stories that you hear growing up in Jamaica, and things that went on there at the plantation that are horrible. And but it's to tie in a character in that plantation story and possible generations that came after. I thought that was creative and interesting. So if you can't tell, it's definitely a must read. Again, one thing I'm gonna say, she talk a lot. The dialogue in there is a lot of patois. Not a lot where you can't read it, but it's in there. She had to keep it authentic. So do. If you can't understand it, now give it a bad rating, please. But see that one, somebody said one person said, let me switch back. One person said they couldn't understand the dialogue, so they decided to give it a bad rating. I don't get that. It is an authentic Jamaican story. Where do you think he was gonna get? Like, the old English? No. So please get an audiobook. I feel like the audiobook would probably be so much easier for people who struggle to read patois, because it is broken English, but I think she did a good job. Also, I'm gonna leave a link to a discussion about writing in your own dialogue in books, and it is where Nicole, Dennis-Benn, Marlon James, and Kai Miller had a discussion about that, about writing that, and the struggle of writing in your own dialogue in books. So I'm gonna leave that link as well. I'm gonna find a video on YouTube so you guys can watch that. But I appreciate this, and I love how authentic it is and how interesting it is. Yes, it has some what you call spiritual, magical realism in terms, in terms of the ghost situation and the folk tales. So if you're not into stuff like that, you might not enjoy this as much, but I thought it was well done, and I really enjoyed this, and it's definitely a thumbs up for me. So yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that, guys. Kudos to her. She did her thing.